Well, good evening and welcome to the apocalypse. No, it's not the apocalypse. It's actually the Starting Point Project's live stream broadcast for March 2020, even though it kind of feels like that. A lot going on my end. I'm sure you guys have a lot going on your end. So I'm very thankful that you took time to chime in to watch this. I got a very important topic tonight, and I'm looking forward to seeing it myself because I have not had a chance to go through it either because of all the mayhem that's been going on around us. Obviously, if you're watching this live, you already know everything about the coronavirus, but for your great-grandchildren watching in 2199 or whatever it is, there's this pandemic going on all around us. It's pretty much changing everything. Tomorrow here in Wisconsin, we're having kind of a mandatory lockdown except for essential businesses. So I will be at home for quite a while. I was scheduled actually to speak in 5 states this month and 6 states next month. Most of that is not happening unless things turn around. I also noticed that this whole pandemic thing actually ties into what we're going to be talking about tonight. I know that we are concerned about the virus, and we should be. There are things going on there with it. However, I think if you're like me, and I know I am, I'm more concerned about people's reactions to this virus and not the virus itself. And we're going to see that with tonight's topic. There is something going on with the issue we'll be discussing, but then on the other hand, you have people's responses to that issue. So it really does tie in quite nicely to what we're going to be discussing this evening. I also thought of this, my mind is a little warped, but you may remember a number of years ago, the whole campaign of hugs, not drugs, take a hug instead of, trying to be on drugs. I think because of the pandemic right now and needing a solution for it, now it's more like drugs, not hugs. Kind of the opposite. Again, this way my mind works. I thought that was kind of funny. And then meme alert. I did do a meme today too. It's maybe not the funniest thing, but just warning you ahead of time. This hit me. Who needs Bitcoins or gold? I've got toilet paper. And you go to the stores and the shelves are just empty. Why everyone grabbed toilet paper? No one's really sure, but they all did. And when other people saw that, they themselves did that, and just the snowball effect. So I think you won't be trading in gold or Bitcoins. You'll probably be trading in toilet paper very soon. I always announce our next live stream broadcast, and it's going to be maybe in April, maybe next month. We don't know. Kind of like to do one, but just everything's up in the air. We don't know what's going on. We will get a hold of you. If you're not on our email newsletter, go to our website there, click on newsletter, sign up. You'll be notified when the next broadcast is going to be and what the topic will be. And I'm also promising not to sing Elvirus. That was a song by the Oak Ridge Boys, I think, something like that. So again, warped sense of humor. I think Tim likes that one. Our audience member, he's laughing a little bit. Now available, streaming videos. This is a new product. This is exciting. Thanks to the Hercules, something like that, efforts of our producer, Bill, and our former producer, Phil. They spent a lot of time putting this together. You can now stream a lot of our videos. You go to our website, click on something like resources and then products, and you'll get to this new page that I haven't really even done anything with yet because it just came out about an hour ago. You can click on streaming there. And when you do that, it takes you to a new page where you'll see a number of our existing videos that are now available for streaming. So you can still buy a physical DVD, but if you're under 50, maybe you don't have a DVD player anymore and you want to stream things, that's where everything is headed. You can now stream many of our DVDs and we'll be converting them. Eventually, we'll have all of them available on the website. So take advantage of that, especially if you're stuck at home and you have nothing else to do or you can't sleep at night. Put one of these things in, it'll put you out right away. So we're very excited about this. Great resources here to help strengthen your faith and an easier way to get a hold of it now through streaming. Our Rim and Raft Tour, I always announce that, we're sold out for this year, which is good for us, maybe not for you if you'd like to go, but we've added 2 more dates now for 2021. We got May 27th through the 30th, August 19th to the 22nd. So if you're interested, get a hold of us. You can go on our website. You can get all the information there and sign up ahead of time so it doesn't fill up before you get a chance to take a look at that. And then again, Mount St. Helens, first time ever we're doing this one this year. In August also, we still have room on this particular trip. Going to be doing a number of hikes out there. and talking about what happened in 1980 when Mount St. Helens erupted, did a lot of damage in a very short period of time, and we will be tying that into the Genesis flood, and a lot of scientists will be there lecturing. It will be a great time. So again, you can click on our website. Now, this is what it looks like right now, Mount St. Helens. Click on our website, choose events, that'll drop down, and then you choose Mount St. Helens Creation Adventure, and you get all the details there. Again, get a hold of us soon if you want to go on that trip. So tonight's show, that's what you all tuned in for, me too. The topic, which you probably already know, the dreaded topic of climate change, a rational discussion. I'm hoping it will be rational. I don't know why I'm doing this topic. A number of people ask me about this as I travel around talking about the Bible and science and the origin of the universe, the origin of life, origin of species, origin of mankind, the whole creation evolution controversy. When we do Q&A, a lot of people say, hey, what's your opinion of global warming? And I always say I'm in favor of it because I live in Wisconsin, so I'm all for it. I kind of joke about it. Then I'll make a few general comments on it and then kind of brush it off just because we don't have a lot of time. But so many people have asked, I thought, you know what, why not just do a live stream broadcast on climate change? Well, I found out choosing this particular topic, and I bit off more than I could chew. I mean, seriously, I really relate to not only the squirrel, but I relate to the nut maybe inside, which would be me. There's a lot to this topic. It is not something simple where you make a few comments and then go on your way. There's a lot to it, more than I could possibly handle. The research, plus with the whole coronavirus thing going on, it really limited my time. I seriously just finished the PowerPoint for this about 20 minutes ago. So we're going to go through it tonight together, and we'll see where that leads. I also saw this meme. Someone once told me not to bite off more than I could chew. I said I'd rather choke on greatness than nibble on mediocrity, sorry. I thought that's pretty cool, very powerful. I like that. But then I saw another one I think I liked even better. It said, don't bite off more than you can chew unless it's chocolate. So that one's kind of a happy thought. I like that one a little better. Climate change. We're going to look at three things here. The intro, I think we're probably in the middle of the intro right now. How do you like it so far? Then we're going to address three huge questions, and then we'll come to some conclusion at the end, and we'll come to some conclusion together. I'm not going to be forcing your mind on anything, just presenting some things. I really want you to decide what you think about the whole topic. So, continuing this intro here, I have a question. What do you personally sense is true regarding climate change? Everyone has some thought of what they think is probably true. Well, whatever that is, you can go on the internet right now and find any number of experts who will basically strongly support your view and agree with that. So you can say, oh yeah, this is what I believe, and this is why, because there was this expert from the University of Chicago or wherever it is, and you can feel confident in that. Does that mean it's true? No, but you can find someone to agree with you, and a lot of people do that. It's kind of human nature. You have your own ideas, you find a few experts, and you're done. You don't really want to look into it any further. Well, hopefully we'll look into it a little bit further. I don't know what your thoughts are on the topic, and maybe you're waiting to get thoughts. Maybe you're waiting for me to tell you what your thoughts should be. Don't do that. I will tell you my thoughts, but that doesn't mean that they're right, because I'm not here to settle this once and for all. The debate's been going on for a long time. It will go on for a long time. There's really virtually almost no issues that have been just solved, and everyone on the whole planet agrees and thinks the same thing. Because a lot of this has to do with someone's philosophy, their worldview, their starting point, and it taints how they look at things and how they interpret evidence. We talk about that all the time. Facts don't speak for themselves. They have to be interpreted. People interpret the same facts different ways. And so there are different ways of looking at things. So I'm not here just to tell you got to believe a certain thing, but I will tell you kind of where I lean towards this and why. For every argument, there's a counter argument. Someone will say something like, wow, that sounds really powerful. But then someone else says, yeah, but what about this? And they have a counter argument. No matter what the topic is, not just climate change, no matter what it is, there's always a counter argument. And you know what? For every counter argument, there's a counter argument. And for every counter argument, there's a counter argument. And it goes on and on. Not forever. At some point, it's got to end, but eventually it gets to a level so deep, You just don't know who's telling the truth. You don't know who's right scientifically. Sometimes someone runs out of an answer, but again, it can get so deep at that point, you just got to choose a side that you like, and that is often what happens for many people. Also, keep in mind this can be a very emotional issue for people, so be careful how you approach it. Perception is reality. Very powerful statement. Well, what does that mean? We all respond not necessarily to what is true, but to what we think is true. If you think certain things are true about whatever topic, in this case, climate change, if you think we're really at the end of the world, it's probably going to cause you to panic. And if we're really at the end of the world, I might be panicking too, to a certain extent. So whatever you think is true, you're going to respond that way. So when you're talking to someone, realize they might really, truly, legitimately believe what they're saying, and expect their responses to be based on them perceiving that those things are actually true. You might actually know that something else is true, but they're responding a different way. You know, someone hears a bang on their door at night, they panic. They think someone's breaking into their house, or they're running in their house, or trying to call the police or whatever, grab a gun or something. Well, maybe it's just their child coming home late. They forgot their key. Maybe they forgot to bring the dog in at night. And they are responding to what they think is true. It turns out, no, it wasn't true at all, but they responded to what they think is true. So we need to keep that in mind as well. Quick climate overview here. Not going to get technical. We don't really need to, but the Earth doesn't just have an atmosphere. It's got layers, kind of like an onion. We got the exosphere, thermosphere, mesosphere, stratosphere, and troposphere. Troposphere is where most of what happens that we see, clouds and planes and all that. Then you got the thermosphere, you got satellites hanging out up there, you got the ozone layer hanging out the lower part of the stratosphere. So different things going on in different layers of our atmosphere. And here's a question that we all ask, especially little kids, and adults never know how to answer this question. Why is this sky blue? Oh, wait a minute, that's not the question. Why is the sky blue? That's the actual question here, sorry. Why is the sky blue? We know it's blue, but what do you say when a child asks you that? And you maybe make something up. Well, it has to do with wavelengths of electromagnetic radiation. On one end of the spectrum, you got things scrunched together, and the other the waves are more spread out. So on the far left there, more towards the reddish end, longer waves. You got cell phone signals, Wi-Fi, and all that going on. On this end, you got X-rays going on, and then kind of a little bit more towards the middle, you have the visible spectrum of light, and that ranges with the whole rainbow colors. While the bluish spectrum towards the right, there's shorter wavelengths. Those get scattered more in our atmosphere, and those are blue. So those are the ones that we actually see more than anything else. That's why the sky is blue. A little free trivia for you there. I won't charge you for that one. So those are the layers in our atmosphere. So what happens is sunlight comes into our atmosphere, especially the lower layer there, hits the Earth. Some of it gets absorbed at the Earth, warms it up. Some of it gets bounced back up into the atmosphere, and it hits particles in the atmosphere, and they get scattered all over. Some of those particles come back down to the Earth. Some go sideways. Some go back out into the outer reaches of the atmosphere. So all this scattering going on, but some of it gets trapped, and that's what causes the nice temperatures that we have today, and that's what relates to climate change. Is it getting too warm there, too cold, whatever. But that's basically what's happening with the physics of it. And here are the atmospheric gases. 78% of our atmosphere is nitrogen, 21% oxygen, 0.39%, much smaller water vapor. Then you got 0.028% is carbon dioxide. We hear about that all the time. And then 0.0001% is methane. We also hear about methane in cows and those kind of gases, but that's kind of the breakdown of these atmospheric gases, the last three of which, those are called greenhouse gases. So you hear a lot about greenhouse gases. Those are the things that are actually interacting with these wavelengths and trapping some of the heat and all that. Those are the significant ones for our topic this evening. And here are the three huge questions that we're going to be addressing this evening. They're so huge they don't even fit on the screen. Let's shrink them up here a little bit. First question is the climate changing? Good question. Second question, if it is changing, is the change bad? Third question, how much of the change would be caused, if any, by human activity? 3 important questions. Number 1, if the climate isn't changing, you got nothing to talk about. Number 2, if it's changing but it's not bad, then why bother talking about it? And number 3, if it's changing, and even if it might be bad, if humans have very little, if anything, to do with it, then what's the point of discussing it much, because there's nothing we can do about it. So those are 3 very important questions. You can see right away, wow, okay, you could narrow most of this conversation down to those 3 questions. So let's take a look at this first question. Is the climate changing? Simple answer, yes. I don't know anyone who doesn't really believe that it is changing. Now, some people say, no, climate changing, global warming's wrong, climate isn't changing. Most people probably are saying that because they heard that from someone else. The climate has always changed, and it's changing now. It doesn't mean it's bad necessarily, but yeah, it's changing. We're not denying that whatsoever. Climate change is true. We can answer that with number 1. Here's a little brief history of climate change. We don't need to go back too far. 950 to 1250 AD, that's what we call the medieval warm period. It was slightly warmer than it is today, about 1 degree Celsius. It was the medieval period, and it was warmer. So it's a medieval warm period. Clever title, pretty apropos, I think. After that, 1300 to 1850 AD, that's the Little Ice Age period. Temperatures dropped about 2 degrees Celsius. It's not a massive change, but kind of significant enough for us to have called it the Little Ice Age. Then 20th and 21st centuries, warming started again out of the Little Ice Age, but it stagnated for pretty much the last 20 years. It's a little bit of history. Then 2016 on, temperature started to decline again slightly, about 0.2 degrees Celsius. So it's stagnated, and then it started dropping off just tiny bit. So has the climate changed? Yeah, we don't question that. These are pretty solid facts. Most people aren't arguing really with this point at all. Second question, if it is changing, and we just concluded, my opinion, it is the change bad? That's another great question. I put this together this afternoon as an analogy. It's not the world's best analogy, but let's say there's a guy here. He's going to go outside, and it's cold out, snowing out. So he wants to prepare for that. So he puts an undershirt on. Let's just pretend he has pants on too. So he puts an undershirt on. It's good. That's going to help him be warmer. And then you watch him, and he puts a short sleeve shirt on top of the undershirt. That's good. That's going to make him even a little bit warmer. Then you watch him, and he puts on a long sleeve t-shirt or sweatshirt or sweater. Great. That'll help him even more. He did that all in like 60 seconds. But you found out he's not going outside for another 5-10 minutes. Well, man, at this rate, he's going to end up looking at the Michelin Man. He's going to be so thick, he's going to be too warm. He might not be able to move around. He falls over. He might freeze to death outside eventually because he can't get up and get back in the house. Well, what did you do? You saw him doing something real. There were actual changes going on right in front of your eyes. And they were, in your mind, good changes. Undershirt, short sleeve shirt, long sleeve sweater or something like that. Those are helpful things. And then you extrapolated that 60-second, window there of actual observation. You extrapolated that into the future. If he keeps doing that for another 5 or 10 minutes, where's this going to end? That's not good. These changes are bad. Well, again, if it continued on that continuum, yeah, that could be bad if that happens. But the initial change that you actually observed, no, that's not bad. It's a good thing. So you can see by making certain assumptions, if the assumptions are wrong, you could come to the wrong conclusion there. And there's a lot of alarmism because of that, extrapolating out into the future. What could happen if these things continue? I was just this afternoon, again, doing research all the time, and I was on ICR's website, Institute of Creation Research. They had a great article. I think it just came out yesterday by Brian Thomas, a guy that I know down there, great researcher, great guy. So I was just reading the article, and he drew my attention to something I think I had heard about before, but just was perfect for tonight's show. Great timing. Talked about Glacier National Park. I'm slated to go out there in September with a group to give a tour of this area. Well, here's a picture of a sign that used to be out there until relatively recently. It's talking about the glaciers being gone by the year 2000. This photo is actually taken in 2017. So in 2017, you're touring Glacier National Park and you see this sign that the glacier is going to be gone by 2020. And this is what it actually said. Talking about the glaciers, they were rapidly shrinking due to human-caused climate change. Computer models indicate the glaciers will be gone by the year 2020. Why 2020? That sounds familiar. Oh yeah, that's this year. Guess what? The glaciers aren't gone. They aren't even close to being gone. So that was just like way off. Their computer models were way, way off. Well, the sign's just completely gone now. So thanks, Brian, for putting that in your article. I recommend you going to icr.org and reading the whole thing. But again, there's a lot of scare tactics and fear mongering related to conclusions that some people are drawing. Remember, science doesn't say anything. Scientists do. They're looking at facts and they're putting, I shouldn't say twists, they're not always trying to necessarily twist it, but they're interpreting it to what they think might be true, looking at some numbers currently, and it leads to some scare tactics and fear mongering. This is from the UN's United Nations Environmental Program. This was in 1989, so it's quite a while ago. What were they saying? A senior UN environmental official, must be right, senior, he's an official. He says entire nations could be wiped off the face of the earth by rising sea levels if global warming trend is not reversed by the year 2000. 2000, you do the math, it's 20 years ago. So if we don't do something soon, to be fair, you can take things out of context, and I heard some people actually use this quote to take it out of context. You might first think he's saying, if we don't do something right away, in the year 2000, entire nations are going to be wiped off the planet. In the context, I believe, my understanding is what he meant was that if we don't do anything by the year 2000 significantly, eventually entire nations will be wiped off the face of the planet. Well, again, we're 20 years past that. We're not even close to that being true. So again, I think that was more of a scare tactic. They were way off. The officials, the experts back then, what statements they made were 30 years past that, was just way, way wrong. And then they show us pictures. Pictures are very emotional. They tug at your heartstrings and they evoke emotions from you as to what's going on. So if you see a little polar bear on a little piece of ice and you feel bad, the ice is melting, he's going to drown or whatever. No, they're good swimmers and all that, but it just appeals to you visually. Also, tsunamis coming in. This is Photoshop, cool picture, but Photoshop, but tsunamis coming, tidal waves and all that. This is real. California fires that we've had recently doing a lot of devastation. So global warming's destroying the planet. So now you show the newscast, California's losing its forests, these devastating fires. Yeah, this was devastating, but tie it into global warming in the future. If we don't do something now, we're not going to be here in 10 years. Well, the numbers of fires in California has actually declined almost 50% in the last 30 years. That's a fact. Is the current one devastating? Yeah, it's bad. It's not a good thing, but we can't say global warming is causing more and more forest fires. It's getting more coverage, but the number has actually declined. And then hurricanes, that's getting worse and worse and worse because of global warming and climate change. And they're more violent now, right? No. This is climatologist Pat Michaels. He said, no, they aren't, responded Michaels. You can take a look at all the hurricanes around the planet. We can see them since 1970 because we've got global satellite coverage. We can measure their power. There's no significant increase whatsoever. No relationship between hurricane activity and surface temperature of the planet. He's saying no relationship. This is from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Even according to them, which they're pushing, the ideas of climate change, there's no measurable increase in the number of hurricanes, but there might be a slight increase. No measurable, but there might be a slight increase. Okay, that's not world ending there. And then from NOAA, this is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. NOAA, clever name. This is a top hurricane expert. He says that it might increase hurricane intensity, this global changes, by 1%. Putting that in context, Hurricane Katrina had winds of 230 miles per hour. That's pretty nasty. 1% increase would take them from 234 to 236 miles an hour. Is anyone going to notice that difference? No, not at all. This is not significant, but show pictures. Oh, this is devastating. We got to do something now or we're all going to be gone. Then we have mass extinctions, global warming, climate change. All these animals are dying. Well, reported and predicted by the United Nations, they reported 1 million extinction of species over the next several decades. I mean, that is alarming. I'd be worried about that if that were true, like, wow, we got to do something, right? Here's the truth. Extinctions peaked in the late 1800s and have been in significant and steady decline ever since. You run the numbers, to reach the UN's numbers, we'd need to have 30,000 species go extinct every year. The average over the past 40 years, keeping in mind we need 30,000 a year to reach their number, 2. The numbers don't line up to what they're claiming. And again, more alarmism. We have 12 years to act. That's presidential candidate Joe Biden. Then we have the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. U.S. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Again, alarmism. This is a New York Times opinion Twitter feed. This is what they said. Panic might seem counterproductive, but in the case of climate change, we're at a point where alarmism and catastrophic thinking are valuable. This looming catastrophe demands an aggressive global response now. So yes, it's called for alarmism and all these scare tactics. We need that now because it's so bad. Here's San Jose Mercury News. This is the text that went into one of their articles. It said this: entire nations could be wiped off the face of the earth by rising sea levels if global warming is not reversed by the year 2000. It goes on, government have 10-year window of opportunity to solve the greenhouse effect before it goes on beyond human control. So we need to solve this by the year 2000, or it's just out of our control. There's nothing we can do. Here we are in 2020. It's not beyond our control. This didn't happen. But again, alarmism. And we have Science News. This is from 1975. Cover Science News magazine. It's a little bit harder to see blurry. The coming, ice age, basically. Many of you remember back in the 70s, we were all worried about heading into another ice age. That did not work out well for them. So then they switched to global warming, and then that didn't work out so well. Then they went to climate change, and think about it. Climate change is perfect. If it gets colder, climate change, that's bad. If it gets warmer, climate change, that's bad. I guarantee you, if the climate doesn't change for a while, they'll say, it's always changing. Now it's not changing, and we're the ones who are stagnating it, and that's bad. So they can have it whatever way they want right now. Time magazine, The Big Freeze, I think that was 1973. 1975, Chicago Tribune, new ice age on way soon. Again, all talking about the ice age. Today, climate justice. These students are protesting and marching. What is climate justice? We have to do the climate justice. Well, that means the climate has been done wrong. How do we know that? What's good climate? What's bad climate? You'd have to know what the perfect climate was for the earth to know that anything too far beyond that is bad, or not far enough up is bad. We don't know. These students are being taught that it's bad, so then they go out and protest. Denial is not a policy. If you need to come up with a policy for something, denying something, yeah, I would agree. That's not a good policy. Do these young students, did they come up with that on their own? No, they're not thinking about that. They're in school or wherever, and they're being told climate change is bad, we're destroying the earth, and to deny it, that's not a policy. So then they make up a sign and they go and they march. They're basically minions. I feel sorry for them. That's the only thing they're hearing. And it's, I think, really messing with their psyche to be drumming that into their brains and getting them out to protest when they don't understand it. Adults don't understand it. How are kids going to understand it? But they're being used as pawns. And you get the pictures and it tugs on your heartstrings. And then here, kids want climate justice. Again, do these kids really understand it? If you took any one individual, sat them down and started asking all these questions, they most likely wouldn't be able to answer any of your questions. They could only parrot a few phrases they heard from someone else. It's not necessarily their fault. They're being used, unfortunately, that way. Then we have Greta Thunberg. Many of you are probably familiar with her. She's a Swedish environmental activist. I personally feel sorry for her because, again, I believe that she's being used as a pawn for climate change alarmism. If you watch any of her videos, she's very, very passionate about what she's saying. And I believe 100% she believes everything that she's saying. And she should be disturbed if what they're telling her to say is true. She became a Person of the Year, Time Magazine, this teenager, Person of the Year, because of what someone else is teaching her. She didn't just decide one day to do all the scientific research. She doesn't really even talk about the science all that much. But someone is teaching her these things, and she's, good in front of the camera, and there's reason to kind of feel for her. And she says, "How dare you?" She'll say, "How dare you do all these things?" And people are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and because she's just half crying, saying these things because someone is teaching her those things. Again, I don't blame her for that. Just a little bit of her background, and please hear me very carefully. I am not bringing these things up to denigrate her in any way. I'm just giving you a little context of where she's coming from with her mental health. She was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, obsessive compulsive disorder, and selective mutism, which is, only talking when you want to or need to. She's got a lot of struggles. She suffered from depression and all that, and then you pile all this climate, change on top of that to get her to worry about all these things. There's a lot to her background. I feel very sorry for her. But you know what? You bring her out, you have her address the UN and all that, and if you dare say anything about the claims she's making, people say, "How dare you attack this teenage girl who has autism? How can you do that?" And you might say, I'm not trying to attack her at all. She's making some claims. I'm commenting on the claims. I don't care who makes those. I am commenting on the claims that were made. But so they throw her out there because what they will do is if you try to address the claims, they will say, "How could you dare attack her?" So much so that now the other side, the people who aren't so much about alarmism, have their own person, Naomi Sieb. She's a German teenager, very well-spoken. I've watched just a little bit of her talk. It's the counter Greta. I'm not saying right or wrong. Both sides can do it, but they're kind of saying, hey, we can have someone of equal stature, in a sense, out there making the opposite claims. This is important too. Forecasting models, output is only as good as the input. You might have heard of what they call GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. I did computer programming for 18 years, and your programs that you write are only as good as the information you program to begin with. When you do forecasting models, these software programs that will predict certain things, they are only as good as information you're feeding in and then what you're telling it to do in the middle. What do you want it to do with the information you're sending? If you're putting garbage in, things that aren't true in, you're going to get false conclusions out. You can even put good things in, but if the middle that's churning away isn't churning with proper logic, you can get out things that are wrong or get out things that you want to get out, not necessarily things that are true. Back to those atmospheric gases. If you take a look at the greenhouse gases and just look at those totals, when you do the math, you get roughly, you can round things off, 93% of those gases are water vapor. We don't hear, no one's talking about water vapor. They're all talking about carbon dioxide and methane is destroying the planet. 93% just water vapor. That's a very significant greenhouse gas. National Geographic actually leaves out water vapor when they're talking about the greenhouse effect. Here's right from their website. They're talking about the greenhouse effect. And we're talking about these gases. It says these gases include carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and fluorinated gases, sometimes known as chlorofluorocarbons. Well, what about water vapor? That's the vast majority of it. They don't even mention it. Water vapor has a significant effect with the greenhouse effect, but it's not being included in a lot of these models. Now here's something from inconvenientfacts.xyz. Not trying to promote their website. I looked at a few things were interesting. I have no idea what else they promote. So don't assume if you go on there that everything they say is great. I don't know what they say. I just got some of my information from them. And they had a nice visual here because visuals speak. No one likes to sit down and listen to a whole lecture anymore. You need sound bites. You want pictures, and you remember the pictures. So look at this. Greenhouse gases there, carbon dioxide, 63%. We're making more carbon dioxide, and it's powerful evidence, with climate change, and we're destroying the planet. Well, you put the water vapor back in, which should be in there because it's a large greenhouse gas, which again makes about 90%. Now the carbon dioxide is down to only 6%, much smaller. I'm not saying it's not significant. I'm not saying it doesn't do anything, but these two visuals will tell whatever story you want. Use one if you want to tell one story, use the other if you want to tell the other story. Again, what do you want to believe? Also, some of these models that are forecasting things, they assume that our atmosphere is in energy balance, meaning the energy that's coming in is kind of balancing the energy that goes back out, so it's kind of in equilibrium. So you take your model that says we're in equilibrium, and now you add to your model extra carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas, and it's going to make the temperatures rise. Well, of course, because you think it's even now, you add more on one side, and it's going to take it out of balance. So you programmed your model to do that. So it's no surprise that when you add carbon dioxide, it shows temperatures going up. No surprise. Then there's the famous hockey stick graph. Some of you might remember. From here to the end of my talk, I've got to skip a lot of details because I just started to run out of time to put this together. Maybe it's good because this would probably be a 5-hour talk. But I'm going to show you a number of graphs. We're not going to look at the details of these graphs, but you can see things that are trending up, like, temperatures are going up over time. The Heartland Institute, I got some information from them. Again, caveat, I don't know all of the materials they have. I don't know if what they say is right or wrong. It just intrigued me. I listened to a few of the videos there, watched them. And so he was explaining these graphs that he was showing. He went through a number of graphs, which I initially was planning on explaining some of that, but I'm going to fast forward to this, the famous hockey stick graph. You can see temperatures are pretty level, and they fluctuate a little bit, that's normal, but they're pretty level over time. But at the end, wow, does it just take off like a hockey stick. That's why they called it the hockey stick graph. Very visual. You could see, wow, temperatures are going crazy, global warming, we have to do something. Here's an email that was discovered which kind of showed this whole scam. It says, I've just completed Mike Nick's trick of adding the real temps to each series for the last 20 years, i.e. from 1981 onwards, and from 1961 for Keith to hide the decline. Hide the decline. The numbers were showing a decline. They don't want people to see that, so you manipulate things a little bit and you could hide the decline. So here's another graph representing things going kind of across and then they spike at the end. Look at the green portion that's going down. When the other ones are spiking up, there's some data here showing, no, this thing is really falling off, that portion right there. Well, they just erased that data, so the decline is gone, so you can still have your hockey stick going up. That's what they did, the famous, you can look it up. In fact, I urge you to look all these things up to read more about them. And talking about desired outcomes, the IPCC, 2 years before releasing their report and before the expert review process had even started, they chose to use man's hockey stick diagram in their report because it better supported what their views were rather than other existing data. So again, nice visual, let's use that one even they know it's not legitimate. And then there's the whole ClimateGate. I was going to explain what went on with ClimateGate. Part of it was they had these forecasting models, showing how things are going bad, global warming and all that. Some other scientists tested it, and it seemed like no matter what they put into it, it was giving the same output because the internal workings were kind of chopping off data that wasn't desired. So, but read about the whole ClimateGate thing. And then we're kind of largely ignoring the sun. The sun I think, plays a huge factor. We don't really understand the sun's total role in climate, but it's very, very significant. There's something having to do with solar particle forcing. Had no time to put that together. And then we have the grand solar minimum and maximum. There are different times in the sun's history where there's more output. Things are generally warmer here on Earth, more energy that we're receiving. Then there's times when it's slower. Right now, actually, we think that we're heading towards the grand solar minimum, where temperatures could drop off. In fact, it could mean for 30 to 50 years to come, we might see much cooler temperatures if the sun plays the role that we think it probably does. And then the temperature relationships to our environments in general. Warming has historically been associated with more bountiful harvests, more land to cultivate, and the rise of empires. So when it's warmer out, you have less ice around, you can go further north. In climate, you can farm all that, farm more land, and whole entire empires have risen during those times. Conversely, cooling has historically had the opposite effect. During the Little Ice Age, half of Iceland's population was wiped out. So warming does seem to be typically good. Yeah, if it keep going and going and going, it wouldn't be good, but we don't know that it's going to keep going and going and going. Even according to NASA, up to 50% of the Earth is greening, meaning increasing in vegetation. Only less than 4% is actually browning. But you show a few areas that are dying off. Look at this global warming, it's tragic. No, 50% of the Earth is actually increasing in greenery. And another quote for perspective. This is again climatologist Pat Michaels. It's warmed up around 1 degree Celsius since 1900, and life expectancy doubled in the industrialized democracies. Yet that temperature ticks up another half a degree and the entire system crashes? That's the most absurd belief. So again, we've had 1 degree increase since the 1900s, and things were really improving, and now just a half a degree change and it's supposed to just crash the whole ecosystem? Doesn't make sense. Question number 3, how much of the change, if any, is caused by human activity? I say crickets chirping, not to say that we are not having an effect, mainly to say I ran out of time to cover this issue. This is huge. Are we really having any effect on the changes that we see? If I had time, I could give you some support for. I think we have very little effect on it. Yeah, we have some. I'm not saying we don't have any, but I think it's a very small percentage. This is way overblown. They're saying, yes, the changes are bad and we're primarily driving the whole thing, which if we are, maybe we should change our behavior. But they're claiming it's an absolute fact, which is not backed up by the real science, and then using that, having draconian measures as a result. So, in conclusion, I have a number of things to say and then summarizing the whole thing. One thing is, as a response to all of this climate change and we need to do something, one thing was we had the Paris Climate Agreement back in 2016. Basically, all these nations got together and they all agreed and brought their papers. We pledged to do this, we pledged to do that. I was going to talk about this a little bit more from memory. I think China submitted their agreement. China pledged in 2015 when they wrote the paper and then brought it to the Accord in 2016. They pledged by the year 2030 to reach a peak of carbon output, at which point they would level off. Okay, that was their agreement, this treaty of the Paris Climate Accord here. They promised to reach a peak by 2030 or 2020, one of those two. Basically, at the time, they were pledging to increase for 20, 25 years. We promised to increase for 20, 25 years, and then we'll level it off. In fact, then there was, I think it was Pakistan or something, they pledged to at some point do something. Wow, that's pretty powerful. And you read these things, there's really nothing to them except for the United States, which I think Obama pledged we would spend $100 billion and change our lifestyle. And even if we did all of that, that has hardly any effect on world climate because you still have China, India doing all their polluting. And China was going to we allowed them in this accord to build 800 more coal plants. When we're bending over backwards to destroy our lives to help with the climate change, this doesn't make any sense. It made people feel good to get together and say that and show the pictures of holding their pieces of paper up, but it's not changing anything. Then we have this from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, their report called The Future of Food and Agriculture. This is what they said. Food production will rise 30% by 2050. That sounds pretty good, unless sustainable practices are adopted, in which case it would probably rise just 10 to 20%. So if we do what we're saying we're supposed to do to save the planet, things are going to get worse. We'll have less food than if we just let things go the way that they're going. That's crazy. Now, in summary, I'm going to summarize the whole thing here. This is from PragerU. Once again, I cannot endorse everything they have because I haven't seen everything they have. I've seen a few things and I like them. I kind of liked what I was hearing and I liked their visuals. They have short videos. I would encourage you to check them out sometime. Just see what they have to say. They did a short video. Watch this video that I'm going to show you graphics from the video because he summarized it so well. This is Richard Lindzen. He's got quite a pedigree here. He's an MIT atmospheric physicist. He's one of the world's leading climatologists. Does that mean he's right about everything he says? No, that's not my point. I'm just saying if we're going to say certain people are experts, this would be one of them. And this is what he said in his video. I'm using his graphics from the video because I didn't have time to do my own. So again, giving him credit, watch his video. He said when talking about the people that are involved with discussing this issue of climate change, you've got three groups of people. You've got two groups that are scientists. Group three, politicians, environmentalists, and the media. Going back to group one, these are scientists who are part of the International Panel on Climate Change. Mostly believe that recent warming is due to man's burning of fossil fuels, oil, coal, natural gases. That's group one. Group two, he says, are skeptics. These are the climate, you're a climate denier, all the name calling and all that. These scientists believe that there are many reasons that the climate changes. Sun, we talked about, clouds, oceans, orbital variations, etc. So many factors, there's no way you could possibly understand all of these things. None of these factors are truly understood, and there's no evidence that CO2 emissions are the dominant factor. No scientific evidence for that claim. That's group number two. Here's what's really interesting. 5 points of agreement between these two scientists who have opposite conclusions, but 5 key things that they actually all agree on. These are the scientists. The other group three, not the scientists. These are the world's scientists who are on both sides of the issue. This is what they agree on. Number one, I skipped. Climate is always changing. They all agree, all these scientists, it's always changing. Number two, CO2, carbon dioxide, is a greenhouse gas that's necessary for life, and adding more would lead to some warming. Yeah, if you add more, it's going to lead to some warming, but it's an essential gas for life. Number three, atmospheric CO2 has been increasing since the end of the Little Ice Age, the mid-1800s. This is a fact. We know, and we're kind of glad because no one wants to live in an ice age. We are thankful that the Earth has warmed up. Number four, over the past 200 years, the Earth's temperature has increased slightly and erratically, about 1 degree Celsius total. 200 years, just 1 degree Celsius. And it's not just a slow thing that goes up. There's so many factors. It's going up and down and up and down. Overall, only 1 degree Celsius. They also say that it's only been since the 1960s that man's activities have been sufficient enough to play any really significant role. And then fifthly, no confident prediction of the future global average temperature or its impact can be made. Even according to the IPCC that I've been quoting, they'll agree there's no way you can predict it because there are way, way too many factors. Here's the shocker of agreement with these two groups of scientists. All the scientists are going to be one group or the other. This claim that burning fossil fuels leads to catastrophe, it's not made by any of them. None of these groups are making that claim that burning the fossil fuels is just it's gonna end the world. They're not claiming that at all. So why do we hear that over and over and over? Guess what? It has to do with group three, the group that aren't scientists. These are the politicians, environmentalists, and media. What agenda do they have? Very quickly summarizing this, politicians, money and power. Any topic you bring up, politicians are basically about money and power. There are some great politicians, but way too many. You follow the money, you follow the power. We could do multiple shows on that. We don't need to. You understand that. Environmentalists, you've got money for their organizations. They need to get you to feel for what they're saying to get more money for their organizations to keep what they've got going. And they need confirmation of their religious-like beliefs that man is an evil disease, basically destroying nature. Some of them think that we are a cancer on the planet and we should wipe ourselves out. I really wanted to put together all these quotes from people who say we need to reduce the world's population to a balanced number of 500 million. 500 million, that's about, I think, a 94% 4% reduction in human population. They are dead serious, no pun intended. You need to get the world's population down. We are killing the planet. That's what they believe. Also, the media, their ideologies, their worldview, what drives their beliefs. Media should just be reporting what's happening in the news, and we can decide. That's a lost art. It doesn't happen anymore. Most of the media have an agenda, and they want you to know what it is so that you believe the same thing. You follow the money and the headlines. And when you think about the money, just off the cuff comment, there's really no money in doing climate research to come up with a conclusion. No, the changes really aren't that bad and we're really not affecting it much. You're not going to make money doing that. But you can get tons, millions of dollars in grant money if you say, our studies show that yes, it's bad, we're heading to catastrophe and man is causing it. You're going to get more grant money, more and more and more and more. So follow the money. And then headlines. This changes everything. The world will end. California will be underwater in the next 10 years if we don't do something. Headlines grab people's attention. So, wrapping the whole thing up, what should be our biblical response? We could do multiple shows on this. I'm going to keep this very, very, very simple. Genesis 8:22. While the earth remaineth, seedtime and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. God created this planet. He knew how long it was going to be around. He knew what was going to happen to it. He created it in such a balanced way. It can handle a lot of flex one way or the other. Maybe not extreme, but he knows it's not going to get that extreme. And we don't have the power to make it that extreme. This does not mean we should go too far the other way and not care about the planet. I think we should recycle. Great idea. We should do that. It makes sense. Look into some other energy alternatives? Yeah, but don't look into things that are not working out, that don't make any sense. So we need to be good stewards of the world that God has given to us, definitely. But just one example, Brian Thomas, Institute of Creation Research, in the article that he just wrote, I think yesterday, had the comment about different times that the climate has changed in history in the Old Testament. You think about the famine during Abraham's time where they all had to go to Egypt to find food. 7-year famine. Is that climate change? Yeah, that's significant climate change. Did that end the world? No, not at all. They got through it, no problem. And there's a lot of reasons why, because God has built in many things into this planet to help things balance themselves out. You go a little bit this way, you come back, go a little bit this way, and it keeps going back and forth. God is a little sharper than we are. He created this planet for us. We need to be good stewards, but we don't have to go into panic mode and think that the world is ending because of global warming, climate change, or the coronavirus. We need to trust God for His guidance, His sovereign guidance in our lives. For those who aren't Christians, who don't have that hope, this is a good time for us to step it up and to show hope and peace to a world that's just kind of going crazy right now, especially with the virus thing, to show where their true hope is in. Their hope is not in finding a vaccine for the virus. Their hope is in Jesus Christ and in Jesus Christ alone. So with that whirlwind tour, I learned a lot along the way as well. We are going to do what we normally do, take a very short little break here, show you a little video commercial. We will come back and we will do live Q&A with your questions. Hang in there. I'll see you in a minute. Well, we are back, and it feels a little warmer here now. The studio warming. So we're going to do your questions. This is my favorite part. I have no idea what your questions are going to be, but I'm sure they're good ones. It's a hot topic. First topic or question we have, and we're going to be a little bit shorter maybe with our Q&A tonight just because the topic went longer. I didn't have time to time this ahead of time, but we'll take as many as we can in a short period of time. Tom in Illinois, are there natural processes that can amplify or limit global warming? I didn't have time to put a lot of research on this, but there are a lot of factors where the Earth can balance itself. Just top of my head, showed you all the layers in the atmosphere. When a lot of heat comes in, if more of it starts to get trapped, let's say there's more CO2, and it does get trapped a little bit more and it warms up slightly. Well, that layer is a little bit warmer. Well, the layer above it is still cooler. A larger temperature differential will have higher rate of heat transfer, thermodynamics. So when it does heat up, you're going to get more heat transfer into that layer of the atmosphere. So that's a balancing factor. We also have when ice sheets melt, you get more algae and things released. Well, the algae absorb CO2 and then they die and they take it into the ocean with them. So it kind of cycles some of that out of our atmosphere, takes it into the ocean. So there's a cycle pattern there, and there's just a whole bunch of things that are like that where there are balances built in, because long before we had industrialized nations around, the Earth was very much in balance. You'd go into a warmer period, you come into an ice age, which I believe the flood triggered that ice age, and then we come out of the ice age and warm up again. It's been in a kind of a nice balance. So God has built that in, and there are a lot of processes to do that. Our efforts aren't really going to be, I don't think, all that significant compared to all of these factors that God himself has built in to the environment. Great question. Paul, Michigan, how do we know what greenhouse gas and temperature levels were in the distant past? Man, that's a great question. I wanted to add that into the program. We'd be here for 3 more hours. This is key. I'll try to summarize this. You'll often hear about ice cores. They drill into the ice sheets and pull out these cores, and then they tell you like, oh, this is what the Earth was like 100,000 years ago, 800,000 years ago, a million years ago, whatever. It's like, how does that jive with the Bible and all these things? I've talked about that a lot in other programs, so I'm not going to go into great depth, but here's one of the issues with ice core drilling. There's an assumption there. They drill into the ice. It's really ice. They pull it out. They have an ice core. That's a fact. There are layers in this core. That's a fact. Nobody questions that. How do we know when they're looking further down this core how long ago that was? There aren't labels on them. They have to make an assumption. They basically assume one layer for every year. So if you're counting down 10,000 layers, that was 10,000 years ago. 30,000 layers, 30,000 years ago. Well, there are problems with that. One problem is that's an assumption of one layer per year. Well, we know today you can get multiple layers in 1 year. You have during a winter time some warmer periods during winter in which things can melt a little bit, and then it freezes and melts. You can get multiple layers in 1 year. And we've seen a plane from World War II that got buried in Greenland, I believe, under all these layers of ice. If you just count up the layers, you say, oh, this thing, was buried hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Like, no, it was World War II. So that's a faulty assumption. Plus, the lower down you get in these ice cores, the harder it is to count these layers, and they start seeing things, really. I mean, because sometimes they'll say, well, this was 45,000 years ago, but then that doesn't jive with something else they wanted to match up with, so they take a second look. Oh, no, it wasn't 45, it was 68,000. They magically found all these other layers in there, just kind of guessing, like, that kind of looks like a layer, right? So when you do that, if you're looking down and you say 45,000 years ago, 800,000 years ago, we'll look at the CO2 content from that layer 800,000 years ago, and this is what the atmosphere was like back then. And then you make guesses how it's changed over those hundreds of thousands of years, and you use that in your models going forward. Well, if it's faulty on your assumption of what happened in the past, it's going to skew greatly your guesses of what's happening in the future. So that's part of what's going on there. And it can just totally throw off that versus believing that the layers in the earth were buried about 4,500 years ago in a global flood. A lot of evidence for that. We've covered that in great detail. And then the ice we're seeing in the ice sheets, basically part of the ice age that was triggered by the flood, and lasted maybe 700 years, according to how long it would take the oceans to cool back down and all that. When you take that into account, you come up with a totally different picture of the history of the Earth's climate. those are all based on two different starting points. We have the same cores in the ice that we're looking at, but it's being interpreted differently, not based on those facts there. It's really being based on what they believe to begin with. Has the Earth been around 4.5 billion years, or did God create it more recently and there was a recent flood 4,500 years ago? That will tell you how you're going to interpret those actual facts that we're looking at. So great question. Phil in Indiana, you might know who this is. What is the difference between climate and weather? Simple one to answer. A lot of people know this one, but if you don't, weather has more to do with temporary changes, local, things like that. Climate is more of the long-term, bigger picture. No one's too worried about any particular weather pattern going on here, but the bigger picture is the climate over longer periods of time. Climate is more stable than weather. Weather can change from day to day, minute to minute. Climate changes a little bit more slowly, but that's the main difference. But great question as it ties into tonight's topic. Aiden, Florida. I have another question. She's submitted great questions in the past. Is the Palmar grasp reflex vestigial, and does the evolutionary worldview devalue human life? This one's not about global warming or climate change, which is fine, but about the concept of vestigial organs. Scientists used to have a list of 86 things in your body that basically were useless, didn't really do anything. Oh, they used to in earlier stages of evolution, but now they don't do anything, like your appendix. Well, scientists have studied that list. They've narrowed it down from 86 down to 0. They found a use for all those things, including the appendix, part of the immune system. So this year, the Palmar grasp, basically if something touches your hand, especially a young child, the hand kind of curls into to grasp something. Primates have that, humans have that. Just because we have a similar response doesn't mean that it evolved from a primate. So it's not useless, or there's actually evidence that that's useful in detecting a number of things. I won't go into all the details because I don't know all the details, but I could look it up. If you're interested, contact us. I'll give you more information. There's a lot of evidence. No, it's not a leftover vestigial structure. It does have function today. And genetically, there's no evidence that we've evolved from an ape-like creature. The more you look at genetics, the further apart apes and humans really are. But great question. With that, next broadcast, hopefully next month, if the Earth is still here, if we haven't lost entire empires because of climate change. If the Earth is still here, hopefully I'll be here. We'll come up with another topic. Maybe we could expand this a little bit. Send us your thoughts and your ideas. Contact us anytime at our website, thestartingpointproject.com. Thank you so much. Even though the world is ending, you took time to be here with us this evening. We appreciate your viewership. Tell other people about it. We want to get the information out because it's all about this answer book. This is the ultimate climate change answer book, God's Word. Even though this is God's first shot at writing a book, I think he did a pretty good job. So we look forward to seeing you hopefully next month. Stay in tune, stay safe, stay healthy. God bless.